Previous basket is under review.
Our journey through international hoops continues as we try to preview you or prepare you as best as possible for the 25-26 college hoop season. I'm Kevin Sweeney. He's Eric Fawcett. We are the scout team on Basket Under Review. And Fawcett, we talked about it last week, but international recruiting just continuing to expand. And, you know, whether it's 22-year-olds coming over for a big payday or young guys trying to get reps to push for the NBA, this has totally changed the way that teams recruit. And, you know, it's going to be fascinating to see some of these teams that have invested big, but in most cases, 7-figure paydays in these guys, and their reliance on them as starters and potentially stars in college basketball. Obviously, Illinois, who we'll mention here right off the rip with Mihailo Petrovic, and nobody's invested more than the Illini in international recruiting, but it's certainly everywhere, and the investments. I think a lot of people are very keen to see them pay off here this college hoop season.
Yeah, it's fascinating because once you open up a market as big as Europe with so many guys from 18 to 23 years old kind of being as eligible targets for college teams to go after, you aren't just seeing, oh, there's one style of big man that you go to Europe to get or one kind of guard. You are seeing all kinds of different players in terms of archetype, size, role, everything like that. So this is a fun one where we talked about last week about the players in the ACC and the role that they'll have. Now we're looking at some guys at other high major spots. And it also becomes really interesting because I feel like a lot of these or some of these coaches are guys who haven't traditionally recruited Europe, at least when it was getting guys out of the as 18-year-olds to come as, quote unquote, high school players, whatever you want to say. So it's another interesting test for some of these teams going after these European guys to see just how they fit the systems, just how productive they are. And there's some pretty fun names on today's list. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, let's start with Illinois and start with Mihailo Petrovic. I know at least the Illinois fans in the Discord who have become quite friendly with. Strikes me that they scout the Adriatic League more so than they scout the transfer portal. I mean, these guys are locked in. I think there was like their 24/7 guys like tweeting out links to watch Derby games. I mean, it's just unbelievable the way that they've embraced it. And even with that, I don't think there was necessarily a lot of expectation that Mihailo Petrovic could end up there. He was an MVP candidate in the Adriatic League this year with Mega. Someone who was in the mix at a lot of other college spots in March and early April before Illinois became a possibility. And the Illini are certainly happy to have him. He's exactly what they needed. A true point guard that can really, really play in ball screens. A guy who's just a lot of fun to watch with the ball in his hands and helps them replace the huge void from Kasparas Yakashonis from a year ago.
Yeah, it's still crazy for you to say, oh, an MVP candidate in the Adriatic League is now coming to college basketball. But when you watch these players
to play, by the way,
yeah, with multiple years of eligibility, because man, when you watch what he is doing against top level European competition, it is remarkable. And he is someone who had the ball so much for Mega, a team that was really good. He shouldered so much of the offensive load. And every single time he used those opportunities and was efficient with them. So to see what he does out of ball screens, so slippery getting to the rim. And then you see guys play off him because he gets to the rim at will. And whenever they do, he just pulls from well beyond the 3-point line. His clips are just magnificent. And he does play a style that could definitely work for Illinois, who you mentioned had a European ball dominant guard last year. This is one who's probably a little bit more of an individual scorer and maybe a little bit less of a distributor at times, though we'll see some clips where he's definitely capable of passing. But what he really wants to do is what we're seeing here, where he keeps getting the same defenders and him in switches and cooking them. So it is almost, mean to see what he does here. Tribes gets a switch late in the paint, pulls the big all the way out, plays with his food, and just could not be more casual laying the ball. And he is so much fun to watch. I can see why these Illinois fans are fired right up, because I think they might have one of the best scoring guards in the country, and they might have him for multiple years. And I mentioned he's a scoring guard, but I don't want that to color the picture like he doesn't want to pass, because as you can see here, his vision is amazing. yes, he probably wants to get to the rim or get to the pull-up three first, but he has absolutely no problem making passes happen, finding teammates. And I just think he's going to be an absolute stat sheet stuffer. I think he's going to be extremely fun. Like, he's going to put up points efficiently, and he's going to do it with style points. This is one of, if not the best pickups, I think, in the kind of European market this year. I think this is going to be a ton of fun.
Yeah, no question. And to be clear, I don't think Illinois expects him or wants to put on him the same type of usage that Kasper Sakashonis had, and that's a great luxury to have, right? Someone who has really played with the ball in his hands a ton and played in a high level team, right? Again, the easiest way to describe Mega and the situation he's coming from is that let me just go through their roster from last year and where they're playing now. Andrea Yelovich, who's at Kentucky. Philip Jovic, who's at Auburn and expected to play a key role. Jack Kyle, who just committed to Gonzaga for 2026. He was on that team. Sergej Makura, who, apologies if I butchered that pronunciation. He's off to Mississippi State. Timotej Malovic, he's off to Miami. Bogolub Markovic, he's an NBA draft pick this past spring. Ilya Miljasevic, he's at DePaul now. Like, he's a high major player. He wasn't even like a big player on this mega team, right? Like their whole roster is high major basketball now. And so that gives you pretty good context as a guy who was, 14-7 guy a year ago, what to potentially expect from him. But again, I think Illinois is hoping he's their third or fourth option offensively with what Ivisic will bring to the table, with what Andrej Stojakovic will bring. They're going to ask him to go make plays, obviously, but maybe not quite to the scale that Mega did. And I think that's certainly very exciting. And again, if there's one team that we can give a lot of credit to in terms of their investment in Europe, it's Illinois. They have evaluated this thing, pretty comprehensively. And when you do that, you set yourself up to be in position to go get a guy like Mihailo Petrovic when he becomes available. And I think that's a move that will pay big dividends here in the college hoop season. Ole Miss, this is a guy who I think probably hasn't gotten as much attention, Fawcett, but you're a hard guy to impress on the film, I would say. And the texts you were sending me as you were watching Ilias Kamardine were very, very funny and very, very positive. You seem very excited about this guy coming over from the French league and a guy who Ole Miss is really betting big on to be one of their best players in the backcourt.
Yeah, I think people are going to love these clips. He is an absolute electric factory. His creativity getting to the rim, whether it's with speed, whether it's change of direction, whether it's some fancy moves with the ball, he is just so slippery. He is so quick, and he is just able to make something happen at all times. And you just cannot take your eyes off the guy when he's on the court, because something crazy could always happen. And you can see his ability to get to the rim and finish, through contact, finish with his length, and oftentimes just arrive alone because he shifted defenders. It's pretty big. And when you see the way he likes to throw no-look passes, be flashy there, he's going to make his teammates a little bit better in a lot of situations. There's going to be times where I'm really curious to see what Chris Beard does when he throws the ball away or maybe misses a defensive assignment. But when it comes to creating something for himself or for his teammates, I think he's one of the best coming to college basketball this year. And he's going to make for some crazy highlights just like that, where he always seems to finish these crazy and ones with just different flicks at the rim. He breaks down defenses in ways that defenses, all the players end up looking at each other like, what just happened? Like, who is supposed to have this guy? I think he is so much fun. And I do think the French league is one that is not as skilled as a lot of the other top leagues in Europe, but it is one that is very fast and very athletic. And I think that that's something that could really help him as he transitions into college basketball. And as we see more of these clips of him hitting no dip threes at the end of the shot clock, using those dribble combinations to just create easy points out of nowhere. I think he is going to be a fan favorite for a lot of players, or a lot of fans who both love Ole Miss and also just love turning on a game and just saying, like, who is this guy as he does something just outrageous on the court?
Yeah. And look, I mean, the main concern I would have with any European player coming to the SEC is just the athleticism and the physicality. It's such a high level athletic league. And so to see these clips of Kamardine and see that that's not going to be a problem, that he's someone that can break people off the bounce and really wreak a lot of havoc athletically, I think that's the really positive sign, and helps him be ready to go. Look, this is an Ole Miss team that struck out in the portal early on, missed on some of their top targets. They needed to strike gold with an international recruit like this to have a chance to get back to the NCAA tournament and back to the second weekend like they were a year ago. And I think Ilias Kamardine is as good of a get as they could have possibly hoped for. And again, someone who's a pretty safe addition. We talked about it last week with Testa Ritter. It's not quite the same level. But this is a guy who's 22 years old, who's 6'5", who has played pretty significant roles on every French national team, youth national team coming up, was averaging 14 a game 2 years ago in the U20 Eurobasket. And now this past year, 9 points and 2 assists per game pretty efficiently in the French league on a Euro Cup team, right? Like this is a guy with pretty extensive experience coming into college hoops.
And I did talk last week about De Ritter being someone who I think is going to really set the market moving forward. And there's, other guys in that kind of category that I think will set the market if they're really good right away. But I also think about a guy like Kamardine, like you said, is not getting a whole lot of buzz where I think he absolutely should be. So that's another guy I think is going to be really interesting for for this kind of market of European players, where there are the international names that are going to top programs that everyone kind of knows about. There's a lot of hype for, and rightfully so. Well, what happens if a guy like Kamardine is in that second tier, yet what if he's awesome? What if he's fringing on an all SEC guy, which I'm not ready to necessarily predict, but it also wouldn't shock me. And every time I watch those clips, I'm like, man, this guy's a lot of fun and can make some things happen. So we'll see. But again, for most people who might be learning his name for the first time, or this is the first time they've watched him after seeing that he committed to Ole Miss, I think he's going to be on everyone's kind of league pass kind of rankings, just in terms of really fun players that even in a game that might not be the most fun matchup, he could do something crazy at any moment.
Yeah. These next two guys that we want to get into before wrapping up the video are both maybe more traditional NBA prospects. They're younger, they're higher upside, but I think they come with some questions, particularly the guy we're about to talk about, Andrej Kostic, who played at a little lower level in Europe. Fawcett was remarking that his games weren't even on Synergy, which is a rarity. Obviously has big time buzz. He's someone that was at the Adidas Euro Camp this summer, had a big role at the U19 World Cup. He's someone that in the NBA, people that I talk to, the draft analysts and whatnot, they're very intrigued by him as a potential first rounder because he possesses that elite size and shooting that's really hard to find. But yeah, there's some ups and downs with his game, and it'll be interesting to see how Kansas State uses him off of a high usage star in PJ Haggerty.
Yeah, and that's going to be kind of the question: is he better prospect than player? I mean, the good is that this is a guy with length who can really, really shoot the basketball, whether off all these little dribble handoff plays, whether it's catching the ball off skips. He can really shoot the ball, and that's the biggest strength. I think he is best catch and shooting right now, as most younger players are. And when you see that, I mean, it's pretty easy to pencil in, if the ball's really humming and it finds him, this is a guy that's really going to make defenses or really punish defenses. When it comes to him handling the ball, got kind of a high dribble and isn't particularly smooth with it. And he is just constantly looking to pull up. He is not looking to get downhill. He does not have his head up looking at teammates. And you can kind of see why, because one of the big issues for him has been finishing at the rim. Not only does he miss a lot at the rim, but a lot of you watch the clips and a lot of them are pretty rough. So again, as you look to what is this guy at the high major level playing a big role, I mean, well, it's a guy who can shoot, but someone who's not very good at getting to the rim, doesn't make shots when he's there. And as you can see in a lot of these plays where he does start handling, vision is not really there. He loses the ball a whole bunch. I don't think he makes great decisions with the ball. And again, I'm not trying to just, say that this kid isn't any good. And you can see that he makes some good moments as a defensive player. Can you kind of use that length? But I just think this is a great opportunity to remind people that European players are not all the same. There are the guys that are coming over as veteran professional players that should be treated as veteran professional players that should have huge roles, should have high expectations, and guys I think are going to contribute. And there's more of the I'll say traditional player coming over from Europe who gets a lot more discussion from NBA draft guys than they get from pro level leagues in Europe that are trying to win right now. So yeah, not necessarily someone I'm expecting to play a massive role this year. I don't know, Kevin. I wasn't particularly thrilled at it, looking at the standpoint of like, what does a guy give us this upcoming season? But yeah, it's certainly an interesting one.
I watched a lot of him in the U19 World Cup, and the first 3 games were disastrous. Like there's no other way around it. And I thought he found his footing a little bit as the tournament went on. It helped that, like, look, when you have all these flaws, you better make shots, right? And early in the tournament, he didn't. And all of a sudden it was like, oh man, like, what are we watching? Like, if this guy isn't an elite shooter, what is he? And then down the stretch, like that clip from the France game that showed where he hits this like smooth step back 3 and just elevates over a defender. Now, like that's silky stuff, and he's a lot of fun to watch. Look, I think the best thing that happened to Andrej Kostic was Jerome Tang landing PJ Haggerty. Like I would have been really worried about him if Kansas State was relying on him to be the best player on this team. Like, that would have been a big ask for me. I think with the way they're constructed now, with an ultra high usage guy in Haggerty, with another really good guard in Nate Johnson from Akron, and then a guy who played real EuroLeague minutes, who we're not going to get to in this video, Ilias Kamardine, who I know they're excited about, who's like a versatile, high skill level front court guy. You have more room for this like big shooter who, yeah, like some games he's going to play 32 minutes. And he's going to make, there will be a game where Andrej Kostic makes 8 threes next year, and it's going to be absolutely electric, right? Like, this guy, like, when he's hot, is scary. There's probably going to be a game where you gotta get him out, right? Like, they just can't be on the floor, and that's going to be like something you have to ride the way with, and that's something that Kansas State has to sit with their investment. This was not a cheap acquisition. Andrej Kostic, this was a guy that they have invested pretty heavily in, and what will the ROI on 1 year be? I don't know. And I think, again, the other question is, like, does he end up as a one and done? Is he someone that ends up maybe being a surprise second year in college? What does that look like? Can he continue to develop and get on a path to being a more well-rounded player? Because, again, the tools are there from a size and shooting standpoint, and that's what's really exciting. It's just bringing it all together, I think, at points is the challenge.
I feel like we've also seen so many times, even just with, American players, taking the international piece out of it. How many times have we seen guys that are 6'6" and can shoot the ball, and they end up being like 9 points a game in college and kind of disappointing, but still show enough that they're first round picks and go on to have great careers in the NBA. Like, it's one of those things that I do wonder if he ends up being not a great college player and his best years being in the NBA afterwards. So is that the worst case scenario for Kansas State fans, where he's like just good enough to go to the league, but not good enough to make a big impact? I guess that would be a little bit of my fear, but again, that's what makes talking about these guys really interesting, because he's just a very different player than the first guards we've discussed.
Yeah. And one more guy we'll bring it home with is Hannes Steinbach, who's a big man headed to Washington. Knowing how crazy the front court market always is, I mean, the fact that you could go out and get a potential starter in the Big Ten from Europe and sign him really right at the start of the chaos of the portal. They got that one done, and I give their staff a lot of credit in terms of the work that they did throughout the season on him after he had a monster U18 Euros the year before. That matters, and they undoubtedly saved money, because the price in May would not have been the price in March. Like, I'm just going to put that on the table, and quite frankly, the price in August wouldn't have been the price in May, because he had a monster summer with the German national team, really turned a lot of heads, and I think proved to a lot of people that he's a guy that's worth considering as a first round pick, despite maybe having some mobility limitations. He has made real strides there, and he's someone that has a chance, I think, to be a monster in college basketball up front.
Yeah, we'll see some of those nice defensive moments at the end where I do think he's improved, but this is a guy playing in a grown man league that is actually kind of known for being a little bit older than a lot of the other domestic leagues. And still, he is the guy who's out there looking like he has grown man strength and really can play a brand of bully ball against bullies that you start to look at like the Big Ten, which still has a lot of, really good big men. And you still think like, oh, he is someone who could really still make things happen with his size. And what I also really like is when you talk about pick and pop threats, a lot of times you're talking about guys who are going to pick and pop and immediately shoot the ball. He is a pick and pop threat who can shoot it, but really he's going to use that advantage from the pop to attack a closeout from a big man. Big men closing out, often a bad scene, and he can really take advantage of that. And that's where I think he's really good. Like, here's a guard who gets switched onto him and he's still able to dribble him down to his dominant hand. Like, that's something that he could really do some damage with in the college basketball game. And if he does need to play off the ball and be a kind of traditional, more wing forward type, he can do that too. Really quick release, shoots the ball really well, and also can attack a closeout. Again, it's not the smoothest, quickest kind of big man, but man, if people try to press up on him, he just keeps that dribble alive, takes the contact, and gets right to the rim. And this is another guy very much in the category, I would say, of really high floor. Like, this is someone who I think is just certain to be a really, really good starter with upside to be possibly all Big Ten. And I think too, you talked about how defense has been a concern for him. Well, here's him guarding, NBA draft pick Ben Seraph in isolation. They tried to pick on him in the series and they didn't really have a lot of success because, yes, he's not the greatest athlete, but he is someone who can still pressure and at the last second recover with his length. And again, don't think he's going to go be the most impactful center in that league, but I don't think it's going to be an issue for him.
Yeah. I mean, without a doubt, the continued strides and continued growth has been really impressive. He's someone just stacks rebounds. Like, statistically, if you go through every level, he has dominated the boards, and I think that will continue. I do wonder, coming from Europe and playing with guys who are maybe more naturally unselfish, what it's like playing with Wesley Yates and Desmond Claude. Like that does kind of poke into my mind. Although I will say, like, he played for the German national team this spring with Christian Andersen and Jack Kyle, and Christian Andersen is probably not your traditional European point guard, right? He's someone that like wants to go get one. And I thought he really responded and handled it really well. So this was a massive get. I think if Washington's in the NCAA tournament, Steinbach will have been a huge reason why. I think he's someone that, will hear his name called next year in the draft. And again, it's kind of closed the book on this international series. Like, this is someone that 3 years ago would never have thought about college basketball because there wouldn't have been enough upside. He would have stayed in Europe and hopefully gotten himself to the NBA from there. Now, because of the money, because of the opportunity, like, he's going to a really good league in the Big Ten. He's going to have a huge role on a good team, on a team that's a chance to be pretty good. He's going to get paid quite well, more than he would have in Europe. And at the end of it, he's going to get incredible exposure from scouts, right? He's going to play in front of NBA decision makers a lot more regularly than he would have had he stayed in the German league. So I think a win-win in a lot of ways, and someone that I think people will really enjoy watching in college hoops this year.
So again, closing the book on this international, just 2-part series we did, I have to ask Sweeney, as you especially talked about the recruitment from Washington, where it happened during the season. I feel like a lot of this recruiting and player acquisition, like, this is not going to be waiting for the spring, for the transfer portal period or anything like that. Yeah. So as we start to see these players we've talked about the last 2 weeks among all these other really good European players, are you expecting there to be a rush on European talent? It didn't quite, like, it didn't end up happening last year for sure. It increased, but I don't think there was like a frenzy. And do you think there is any chance that there is an absolute frenzy here in like December, January, as things are well into the European basketball season? So there's a lot of film there, and people in college realize how good some of these are. What do you think European recruiting is going to look like for the upcoming season?
Look, I would say this: everybody wants to find a way to get a discount on every player, and it's hard to do it. And I'm not going to sit here and say that you're going to magically get all these guys on the cheap, but like, you have no chance of getting them on the cheap if you wait until May 1st when nobody else has any other options. And you say, hey, like, come to me, I'm Mr. Moneybags, right? Like, that's never, you're going to pay the premium, right? And so I do think there will be investment, especially because it's a weak high school class of schools, especially ones who have built relationships over there, saying, hey, like, we're going to recruit these guys throughout the year. Guys we saw at U19 World Cup, guys we saw at U18 or U20 Euros. There was a ton of investment and time there. And I think you will see a lot of those guys. Those guys recruited more consistently throughout the season. I think, I've already heard of several guys who are in that boat, and we saw an early commitment from Jack Kyle about a week ago, who's going to Gonzaga, someone that is a high level guy, and an example of that. So yeah, I think it'll be a much more rolling process. I do still think a lot of people will view international as maybe not the last bastion of hope for their team, but they'll still prefer the portal talent they can get. But I certainly think it's increasing. And one thing I will also point out, and this is something I've talked to a few people about and have heard about the possibility of, I would not rule out, and I don't think this will be a massive wave, but I think this year could be the start of what becomes a pretty big trend. International players coming over mid-season, right? Teams who have an injury, teams who realize, oh man, our guard play is not good enough. Like the teams who are desperate go out and try to find an international guy who can break their contract and come at the semester break. Now, there are some logistical challenges with that. You got to get them through the NCAA clearinghouse. You got to get them eligible. That's work that really should be getting done now. And that's something that the agents can start doing right now, even if they don't have a school in mind. But I'm not saying that every team's going to do this or even 25 teams will do it, but would it shock me if 3 or 5 teams that, struggle early on or have an injury that they don't expect go out and make a real push to try to add a guy at the mid-year just to have some depth? I think that's certainly possible. And if it works, you can guarantee people are going to be hunting it as sort of the trade deadline, if you will, in future years.
Yeah, well, just, 2 notes, because that's a really interesting point you made. The first thing, just in terms of the timeline, I think it's also important for people to note that a lot of these leagues in Europe run really late into the summer, just kind of like the NBA. So I even think about like Ivan Karchenkov going to Arizona, where he wanted to wait until his season in Europe was done. So he committed late June, early July, where not everyone is going to wait until their season is done to commit. But it's one of those things that if you're waiting for these guys' seasons to end and then really kind of start recruiting them in earnest, well, that is going to be the middle of May or into June for a lot of these guys. And then the other thing that I know from European basketball is a lot of these players' contracts are not watertight in the way that they're going to have to change. A lot of these teams are not going to be protected against having relatively low buyouts. That will be nothing to a lot of these high major teams to bring some guys over mid. So again, there's a lot more hurdles past like a buyout contract, but I think the teams are starting to get wise, especially with their younger guys that will or have a good opportunity to get poached by the NCAA. But right now there are still guys available whose buyouts would be rounding errors for some of these NIL budgets. And I've thought about that kind of in terms of what we're seeing with guys getting acquired in the offseason. I did not think about the idea of these guys getting reinforcements at the semester break. So that is definitely something to watch. And I can only imagine the think pieces and the takes from a lot of college basketball media that would come out when if or when that happens.
Look, and again, I can't emphasize enough. This is not every player in Europe makes no money, but there are a lot of very good players in Europe who make so much less money than very average high major college basketball players that yes, everybody wants to be $1 million player. And a lot of these guys were because of this market, right? Petrovic is right around there. Kamardine, I believe, around $1 million. And then Kostic was above that once you factor in the buyout and everything. But, for the most part, 300 grand in college is still better than 75 in Europe. And there's some guys who would run to that offer. So it'll be fascinating to see how it all plays out. I'm not promising anything, but it's something to keep an eye on. And certainly these 4 players we highlighted today, Mihailo Petrovic, Ilias Kamardine, Andrej Kostic, and Hannes Steinbach are guys to keep an eye out on as well. It's been a fun one. We've got more previews coming as the season inches closer. Please subscribe to Basket Under Review, the best independent home for college hoops coverage. We've got great writers, great podcasts and video, and of course the Discord community, which is about to get hopping here as the season gets underway. So check out that, and we will see you all soon.